Real stories, real people.
Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo seemed to fit perfectly into society's idea of a normal couple. Young, attractive, well-educated. Neighbors and friends described them as ordinary, even admirable. Nothing about their appearance suggested danger. They smiled in photographs, planned their future, spoke of love and stability. In a world that trusts appearances, they blended in effortlessly. No one imagined that behind that carefully constructed facade, one of the most disturbing criminal stories in Canadian history was quietly taking shape. Because sometimes, evil does not hide in the dark, it stands in plain sight. Karla was born in Port Credit, Ontario, in 1970. She was the eldest of 3 sisters and stood out early for her intelligence and dominant personality. To her family, she was responsible and ambitious. She dreamed of a better life, of being seen, of controlling her own destiny. No one suspected that this desire for approval and power would one day take on a monstrous form. During her teenage years, Karla learned something dangerous, that pleasing others could be a way to survive, and that lesson would shape everything that followed. Paul Bernardo was born in Scarborough in 1964. His youth was marked by deep trauma, family abuse, buried secrets, and unresolved rage. From an early age, he showed violent behavior and an unhealthy obsession with control. In private, he was already a predator. In public, a seemingly respectable man. While studying and working, he began attacking women, becoming the rapist police were desperately searching for. No one realized the monster was already among them, waiting for someone who would never walk away. Karla and Paul met when she was 17 years old. The connection was immediate, intense, and dangerous. He found someone willing to submit. She believed she had found love. Their relationship was built on imbalance, manipulation, and fear. Paul demanded constant proof of loyalty. Karla learned to give in. Every boundary crossed seemed necessary to keep the relationship alive. Without fully realizing it, she began participating in something from which there was no return, because some decisions, once made, cannot be undone. Over time, Paul developed an obsession with Tammy, Karla's younger sister. He watched her, entered her room, reduced her to an object. Karla knew. She confronted him. His response was clear. If she wanted to stay with him, she had to help. That was the decisive moment. There were no weapons, no screams, just a silent choice. Karla agreed. And in doing so, she crossed an invisible line that separated her forever from any remaining innocence. On the night of December 23, 1990, the family slept while Karla and Paul acted. They drugged Tammy, carried her to the basement, recorded what they did. During the assault, the girl began to choke. When they tried to intervene, it was already too late. Tammy died that night, and the most terrifying part was not only her death, but what came after. They did not call for help immediately. First, they cleaned, organized, pretended everything was normal, as if Christmas itself had not just been destroyed forever. The parents believed the official version, an accidental overdose. So did the police. No one questioned the inconsistencies. No one looked closely enough. The system failed. And because of that failure, Karla and Paul remained free. Weeks later, they moved. They continued, recorded more assaults, kidnapped, killed again. While Canada searched for answers, the killers planned a wedding. They smiled for the cameras, unaware that the past was already preparing their downfall. Months later, human remains were found in a lake. They belonged to a teenage girl. Soon after, Another young girl vanished after being lured in a parking lot. Witnesses reported a gold-colored car. A small mistake delayed the investigation. Each error cost time. Time that cost lives. Carla and Paul changed their last name, hid more carefully. And throughout it all, no one imagined that the smiling woman next door had played a central role in every crime. The relationship ended in violence. In December of 1992, Paul brutally assaulted Carla. This time, the fear was real. Her injuries raised suspicions. Forced to leave the house, Carla spoke. She identified Paul as the Scarborough rapist. She confessed to the crimes. Yet, even then, the system hesitated. Paul was questioned and released. Only DNA evidence, analyzed years later, confirmed what had already happened. The truth had always been there, but no one wanted to see it. To convict Paul, authorities needed Carla. She negotiated 12 years in prison in exchange for her testimony. The deal was signed before the videos were discovered. When the recordings surfaced, it was too late. They revealed something devastating. Carla was not just a victim. She participated. She assisted. She recorded. Canada reacted with outrage. But the law had already spoken. Sometimes justice arrives, but it arrives incomplete. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison. Carla Homolka received 12 years. He would never be released. She would. During the trial, Carla spoke of love, fear, and manipulation. Some believed her, others never did. The victims' families were left with a wound that never healed, because not all guilt is punished equally, and not all truths bring comfort. Carla Homolka was released in 2005. She changed her name, started a new family, tried to disappear, but the past does not forget. Years later, her presence near children sparked public outrage once again. She never offered full explanations. She could never erase what she had done. Today, her story is remembered not only for the crimes, but for the question it leaves hanging in the air. How far can someone go simply to avoid being alone? For years, Bruce MacArthur appeared harmless, a quiet older man, a professional landscaper. During the holidays, he put on a red suit and white beard, working as Santa Claus in shopping malls across Toronto. Parents trusted him. Children smiled for photos. No one saw danger. Because sometimes, evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in plain sight. Behind that ordinary appearance, MacArthur lived a second life. At night, he used dating apps and frequented Toronto's gay village. Online, he called himself Silver Fox. He presented confidence, dominance, experience. He knew how to attract, and he knew how to choose. The gay village was a place of connection and freedom, but it was also a place where many lived quietly, cautiously. Immigrants, men with families, refugees, people who could not be fully open about who they were. MacArthur noticed that vulnerability, and he turned it into opportunity. MacArthur often used GHB, a colorless, odorless drug that lowers inhibition and can cause sudden unconsciousness. In some social and sexual settings, it raises little suspicion. In the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon, a substance that erases awareness and leaves no defense. The murders were not impulsive. They followed a pattern. MacArthur restrained his victims, dressed them in fur coats, and photographed them. On his computer, police later found numbered folders, one for each man. These were not memories of affection. They were trophies of control. Many of the victims lived double lives of their own. Some feared deportation, others feared family shame. Some were married, some were undocumented. Because of this, not all disappearances were reported quickly or at all. Silence did not protect them, it erased them. Between 2010 and 2017, 8 men were killed. Salim Essen, Andrew Kinsman, Majid Kayhan, Dean Lisowick, Kirushna Kumar, Kanagaratnam, Abdul Basir Faizi, Skandaraj Navaratnam, and Sarush Mahmoodi. 8 names, 8 lives, 8 stories that deserve to be remembered. There were signs, patterns, similar disappearances. One detective even warned that Toronto might be dealing with a serial killer. Messages were sent, calls were made, but connections were missed, delayed, or dismissed. The danger was visible yet unrecognized. Not everyone died. Some survived by chance. Sean Cribbin met MacArthur, lost consciousness, and later walked away, believing it was simply a bad encounter. Years later, police showed him a photograph taken while he was unconscious. He didn't know it then, but he had narrowly escaped death. In 2018, police finally arrested Bruce MacArthur. Inside his apartment, they found digital evidence, photographs, and files that confirmed years of suspicion. The harmless Santa Claus image collapsed in an instant. The mask was gone. MacArthur pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. There was no full trial. Much evidence was never publicly examined. Many questions remained unanswered. Justice was delivered, but not clarity. Today, Toronto's gay village still remembers. Murals stand where lives were erased. An independent review confirmed serious investigative failures not driven by open hatred, but by neglect and delay. And when justice comes too late, the silence lasts forever. It was Christmas Eve in Covina, California. Inside the Ortega family home, nearly 25 relatives gathered for dinner, laughter, and tradition. Children played, adults talked, and the house glowed with warm holiday lights. No one imagined that someone was walking toward them with a plan shaped entirely by bitterness. Someone dressed as Santa Claus. 8-year-old Katrina heard the doorbell ring and rushed excitedly to open it. For her, it was a magical moment the night she believed Santa would finally visit. She had no idea that behind that red suit was not joy, but the beginning of unthinkable terror. When Katrina opened the door, she froze. Standing before her was Santa himself, red suit, white fur, and a large wrapped box. She stepped forward, smiling, ready to embrace him. But the man lifted a handgun and fired a single shot that struck her in the face. The sound echoed through the house. Panic erupted instantly. The man in the suit stepped inside and began shooting at everyone in sight, without hesitation or emotion. In seconds, a night meant for celebration turned into chaos and screams. The magic of Christmas disappeared, replaced by fear so intense it felt unreal. The attacker was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, a 45-year-old software engineer whose life seemed, from the outside, stable and ordinary. Friends described him as polite, smart, even gentle. But beneath that surface was a man who carried immense resentment, disappointment, and a growing obsession with revenge. His recent divorce from Sylvia Ortiz had consumed him. Legal fees, alimony, and the collapse of his marriage fed a darker side he hid from everyone. Quietly, methodically, Bruce began to build a plan, one that would not just hurt, but destroy. No one around him understood the depth of his rage until it was too late. Bruce had always been intelligent. He excelled in math, studied computer science, and even worked at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. But his emotional life was a trail of broken relationships, impulsive choices, and selfish behavior. Years earlier, he abandoned a fiancée on their wedding day and spent her savings on vacation. Friends saw him as a big kid, smart but irresponsible, charming yet immature. Red flags existed everywhere, but none suggested he was capable of true violence. The bitterness inside him simmered slowly, unnoticed by most, until a divorce ignited something far more destructive than anyone imagined. Bruce and Sylvia married in 2006. At first, life seemed stable, a new home, shared routines, plans for the future. But within months, Bruce became distant, controlling, and obsessed with money. Arguments escalated. By early 2008, Sylvia filed for divorce, and a judge ordered Bruce to pay monthly support. To outsiders, he appeared heartbroken, quiet, sad, withdrawn, but behind closed doors, resentment hardened into fury. He began collecting weapons, saving ammunition, and designing a homemade flamethrower. He ordered a custom Santa Claus suit with extra room for concealed items. His mind had already chosen Christmas Eve as the day of reckoning. Throughout the summer and fall, Bruce's preparations became more elaborate. He purchased multiple handguns legally, gathered hundreds of rounds, and experimented with fuel systems to create a flamethrower capable of engulfing an entire house. He rented an SUV for his escape and packed it with explosives. Every step was calculated, every decision rehearsed. To the world, he looked quiet, maybe depressed, maybe tired. But inside, the plan had already crystallized. Enter, kill, burn, disappear. By December, the only thing left was the costume, the weapons, and the cold determination of a man who believed vengeance would rewrite his story. On December 24th, around 10 p.m., Bruce walked out of his house, dressed head to toe as Santa Claus. A neighbor greeted him casually. Another later stopped by to invite him to a Christmas mass. No one suspected anything. Bruce was already driving toward Covina, toward Sylvia's family home. In the back of the rented SUV sat his guns, his flamethrower disguised as a Christmas gift, and extra ammunition. He knew the entire family would be gathered there. Christmas Eve was the perfect stage for the violence he had imagined for months. The lights along the quiet street hid the darkness he carried. At 11 p.m., Bruce rang the doorbell. Katrina opened the door with joy, unaware of the danger. After shooting her, he stepped into the crowded living room and opened fire on relatives who seconds earlier had been laughing and celebrating. People screamed, hid, or ran toward windows. 16 escaped, but 9 were killed instantly, including Sylvia, her parents, and several siblings. One survivor, Letitia, called 911 through tears. "He's shooting my whole family. My daughter." They shot her in the face. Her voice trembled as the chaos continued around her. Christmas Eve had collapsed into a nightmare of smoke and blood. After emptying his magazines, Bruce unwrapped the package he'd carried, revealing the homemade flamethrower. He sprayed fuel throughout the house, igniting a fire so violent that flames shot more than 40 feet into the air. When firefighters arrived, the home was fully engulfed. 80 responders fought the inferno for nearly 2 hours. The heat was so intense that the victims' remains could only be identified through dental and medical records. The Ortega home, once filled with tradition and warmth, was reduced to ash and silence. A night meant for family unity had become one of the darkest events in the town's history. Bruce fled the scene, but he was severely burned when the flamethrower malfunctioned and the suit melted onto his skin. Unable to seek medical help, he drove to his brother's home, intending to switch cars and continue toward Canada, but the pain and the reality of his actions closed in quickly. Hours later, he sat alone in the house and turned a gun on himself. When his brother returned early on Christmas morning, he discovered Bruce's body. The Santa suit was fused to his skin. The man who had planned every detail had not planned for the fire to destroy his escape. Police searching the scene found $17,000 strapped to Bruce's body beneath the suit money he intended to use while on the run. In the rented SUV, investigators discovered additional weapons, ammunition, and an improvised explosive device concealed under torn pieces of the Santa costume. The bomb was too unstable to move, and authorities were forced to detonate the vehicle in a controlled explosion. The massacre left 9 people dead, 16 injured, and an entire community traumatized. Investigators described the event as one of the most brutal Christmas-related crimes in American history, a night of violence wrapped in holiday colors. In the days that followed, Covina struggled to understand how a man who once appeared gentle could commit such terror. Parents hesitated to explain to their children why Santa had brought destruction instead of gifts. The contrast was too painful, too surreal. Christmas lights glowed quietly over a community in mourning. Each year, the memory returns, a reminder that even the brightest traditions can hide shadows capable of shattering everything. The Covina Christmas Massacre remains a chilling testament to how rage, when left unchecked, can turn a symbol of joy into the face of unimaginable darkness.